Hello and welcome to another episode of Reverb. I am Melissa Jimenez, the General Manager of MuiscTT. And of course, completely unrelated, for those of you who have watched past Reverb episodes, you would know I love to do themed according to holidays. So happy Easter to those who celebrate. So today I am joined by Miss Tarita Kalu on behalf of Harvester, the IP marketplace. So, Tarita, welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I am an intellectual property and entertainment attorney. I have a boutique legal practice that specializes in intellectual property law and also intellectual property education. So I assist clients in terms of protecting their intellectual property rights. I assist in terms of intellectual property litigation, and I also assist in terms of intellectual property management and monetization.
That sounds like an exciting yet very hard job. Will not want to
Extremely
be in your
exciting.
shoes. All right, so diving straight into it, there is a lot of talk, and as always, about IP as it relates to creatives, and in this case specifically the music industry. So, why is intellectual property so important for creatives and musicians as a whole?
So intellectual property, in a nutshell, refers to the expressed creations of the mind. So it's any new and creative work that has been put into motion or put into practice. So it goes beyond just our brilliant thoughts or what we think about, and it's an actual expression. And this is the essence of what the creative sector does. They have very new and very creative, very innovative ways that they display their various works, whether it be in the music industry or in the art industry. And so when they create these works, they create different forms of intellectual property, and different intellectual property rights therefore arises in them.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's so important is because the bulk of value of these work lie within those intangible assets that you cannot see. Because in a normal business, for example, if you have a business or a company, you have tangible assets you can look at and say, okay, well, these are my assets and this is what my company is worth. But in terms of the creatives, the bulk and value of their work lies in their intangible assets, which is their intellectual property. And as you would know, in the music industry, the bulk of their rights, what gives them exclusivity to reproduce their works, to publicly perform it, to stop other persons from using their works, is their intellectual property right, and in this case, their copyright. So it's extremely important for them to protect and also for them to exploit.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you mentioned that there are different types of IP to be recognized there, because I know for musicians and creatives in general, they hear IP and the first thing they always think about is copyright. They go straight to copyright and forget about everybody else in the
Yes.
party. So thanks very much for clarifying that for us. So moving on to, what are various revenue streams available for creatives? Um, I know recently there was that whole debate that went out about, well, not debate, the article that went out about Rihanna and Fenty, and showing the importance of diversification. And she mentioned in the article as well that Fenty is the one that actually brought her to that billionaire status, right? Not her music. So can you speak to that a bit?
Yes. So there are, of course, various revenue streams available for creators. And for the purposes of this discussion, we could focus on the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
So the traditional ways of creating revenue, of course, would have been through live performances,
Mm-hmm.
through sale of whatever albums they would have created, whatever records they would have created. And that is primarily where a lot of the royalties would have come from. And particularly also when it's played on the radio or it's played on television, and where you have properly functioning collective management organizations that then collect on their behalf and distribute the royalties. In terms of other revenue streams and where where we've been seeing a lot of our artists really maximizing on is in terms of, for example, digital streaming. And you've seen a direct increase in terms of earning revenue through that method. Another method that is commonly used worldwide, but I don't find that it is very prevalent amongst many of our persons in the music industry locally, is in terms of synchronization licenses. And this is where they license their works to be used in audiovisual production, such as films or television or advertisements. And that also has a lot of room where they can make and earn royalties. So, of course, that's dealing with exploitation of the copyright rights subsisting in the works. But as you said, in terms of Rihanna, in terms of Fenty, that's not actually where she makes a lot of the money. So, another type of intellectual property right that is utilized by these persons that branch out and diversify is in terms of trademarks. So, a trademark is any sign or symbol that, you know, is used as a badge or source of origin for your product. So when you see that particular logo, see that particular name, you immediately know the source of those goods or services. And a lot of our local artists and a lot of our popular musicians have utilized trademarks, and they've utilized it in a way where they've created a particular value behind this trademark, and they have used it to seamlessly diversify into other fields and into other completely unrelated fields and markets. And they have used that particular brand that they would have had a particular reputation attached to it in terms of the music industry, and it has allowed them to not just diversify locally but also regionally and internationally. And that's another type of intellectual property right that persons in the creative sector should be very mindful of. They should guard very zealously, because their brand, it does represent a lot of value as well. And it also is a way that they can earn revenue in different markets.
And I do think that that is something now that our music sector locally and even regionally is now really starting to pay attention to, because we know our Caribbean society is very much based on live events. And as the past 2 years with lovely COVID has taught us, is that we can't place emphasis on that where our earning and revenue is concerned. We have to look at those different pots of gold, as it were, and where to
Definitely.
put our hands in. So yeah, definitely we need to pay some more attention to that and have our creatives explore more what those avenues are and capitalize on it.
Yes, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So IP Harvester, I'm saying the name correctly, right?
Yes.
Yes, that is its cool name that it's been given. Yeah. All right. So IP Harvester, tell me more about that.
So IP Harvester is a passion project of mine. It took 9 months to a year to come to fruition. And what it is meant to do is to address what I have seen, or in my perception, what I think are the shortfalls in our intellectual property system, both not just locally but also regionally. And one of the things I identify first and foremost, and I'm sure that a lot of persons in the music industry can relate to this, is that sometimes you don't even know who are the proper intellectual property agents or attorneys to go to. And IP, particularly copyright, is such a specialized field that without the proper guidance in terms of how to protect your works, or in terms of formalizing proper legal agreements, you could get yourself in a lot of issues. You could not properly manage or monetize your intellectual property. And so, first and foremost, IP Harvester has a list of vetted intellectual property agents and attorneys that are practicing in the field. So it's almost as a resource that persons can go to, not just locally, but within the region, and determine who are the practitioners in this field, so they get that specialized type of advice. The idea behind Harvester is to create an online intellectual property marketplace. And the reason being, I mean, the simple reason being is that we don't have one. So there's nowhere we can go to, trade intellectual property formally, to license it, to look for funding for it, to sell it, depending on what you want to do with your intellectual property. And so it is meant to create a regional online intellectual property marketplace where you can do this. And the aim of that is to basically have a market where you can now attach a market value to intellectual property, something that you can look and you can see the value, you can see how easily it can move. And the long-term plan for IP Harvester is for this to be the stepping stone for financial institutions to start using intellectual property as collateral. Because without an actual marketplace, there's no security for these financial institutions to want to use intellectual property as collateral. Because if there's no market, how do they dispose of the asset if they have to realize on the security? And so this is the first step in that direction. It is also meant to provide ancillary services for that I think are currently lacking locally and regionally. So firstly, in terms of intellectual property audits, a lot of persons have a lot of intellectual property that they are not even aware of. And a lot of persons think they have a lot of intellectual property and they're not aware of the fact that they don't. And so one of the services that IP Harvester provides is intellectual property audits. And what it is meant to do is to look at persons' portfolios. So for example, in the music industry, to look at whatever works they would have created, ensure that it was properly protected, ensure that they properly documented, so they have to assert copyright, for example. They have the proper documentation to do so. It is also to look and make sure that the proper agreements are in place so that you know exactly who owns what, ensure that persons are getting their proper royalties, ensure you are not in breach of anybody else's intellectual property, and that no one is breaching your intellectual property.
Right.
So first and foremost, that's one of the main ancillary services of IP Harvester. I think a lot of persons, they don't actually do a proper audit to determine what it is they own. And without knowing what you own, you can't properly exploit it or monetize it, of course. And another ancillary service, which I think is something we definitely need as a region, is intellectual property valuations. So we do a lot of licensing, especially in the music industry, as you know. And I'm always at a loss as to, how do you come up with these figures? How do you determine what is your license fee? And what is a fair license fee that represents the value of your work without a proper intellectual property valuation being done? And this as well goes in tandem with my long-term goal of these financial institutions accepting IP as collateral. Because of course, just as when you use land as collateral and you produce your valuation report, the bank will also need a similar type of report to be able to use your IP as collateral to determine what is this IP worth in the years to come. How is this going to generate particular income and be valuable in the long run? So that's another ancillary service that I think will be very useful in our intellectual property systems regionally.
That is exciting stuff. Yeah. I must admit, when I was introduced to the concept of your business that you're starting here, I was like, okay, all right, this is interesting. Me likey. All right, let's see how this conversation goes. So I dug into your website quite a bit to start reading and poking about and stuff. Lovely website, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, so again, totally unrelated. You will realize that I'm just very random. So I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm seeing the thing wiggling on my head every time I go yes in agreement. So I'm literally trying not to laugh while I'm
They're
speaking
agreeing
to
with you.
They're agreeing with me. Okay, I like that concept. I can live with that. All right. So how can creatives benefit from IP Harvester?
So in terms of, if you're looking at the music industry, and my plans in terms of how they can benefit would be first and foremost in terms of of course, finding proper representation. So if they have any particular licenses that they need reviewing, or they have particular works and they're not too sure how to protect it, or again, if they want to diversify and get into branding and merchandising, co-branding, sponsorships, that they have that resource, not just locally, but regionally. So if they want to, expand into the region, that they have that resource at their fingertips, that they could rely on these persons to guide them properly. So that's the first way in which I think they can benefit from Harvester. The second way is in terms of offering licenses. So there are so many works that they create, and it's there, and they may not have put it out into the market, or they may not have someone managing their works, and it's actually works that persons may want to use in their TV show or an advertisement or in a film. And so the main aspect of IP Harvester is where they can offer those works up for a license. They could put all the terms in there so that anybody looking for specific works, they can then go there and then contact them directly, whether through an IP agent or if they're putting up their works directly, and negotiate whatever licensing terms, and then they could engage in a synchronization license, for example. And that way they can directly earn revenue from their works. I have facilities where you can demo the work, so you already know what you're getting, and persons can shop around on the platform and determine, what works best for them. And it also, of course, gives them a lot of visibility on a regional scale, because it's a regional platform. So whether or not they want those particular works that they're offering for licenses, or whether they want to contact them to commission their own works, so just to put them out there and to give them one other mode of licensing and a revenue stream.
Right. And as you said before, talent and worth lies in the IP. So, it's very important for them to understand the benefits and understand how they can use it, right? Um, so in terms of how IP Harvester works exactly, how does it work?
So, and this is in terms of displaying of your works, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So IP Harvester primarily, and I would advise persons who are using it, is that they can first contact an IP agent. So you have a list of IP agents that have their own accounts with IP Harvester. And that particular agent can then display their works, advise them whether they need to protect certain aspects before licensing, because as you know, certain intellectual property rights are territorial. So for example, trademarks, you are only granted protection in the country in which you file. So if you file for a trademark in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, and you want to expand into St. Lucia, you will have that IP agent there to guide you and say, okay, no, before you could offer a license, you have to protect your work there first. You have to protect your trademark there first. In terms of when you're offering your licenses for copyright protected works, copyright subsists automatically as soon as the work is created. But of course, you have to be able to assert your protection and show that you were the one who created it. So the IP agent could guide you in terms of ensuring your works are properly documented and properly recorded to show ownership and assert ownership. And then that IP agent can then manage that particular work or works for licensing. So persons could directly contact them, and they could be the representative on behalf of the IP owner or the rights holder. Alternatively, there's also the option where the rights holder themselves, I mean, I'm sure if they're IP savvy, and we have a lot of IP savvy persons who are IP owners, they could represent themselves and they could create an account, they could put up their works, and they could directly liaise with the persons interested in buying their IP, in licensing their IP, or even funding their IP, depending on what it is that they're offering.
Okay. And just to clarify, the early stages of the company is going to focus on Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. So just to give you a better idea, I've created a demo. So I will take you through step by step all the different functions of the platform and exactly how it works.
Okay.
We live in a world of trade. Our world is an interconnected world of buyers and sellers. For almost every service or product, there is a medium through which trade can be facilitated. There's a marketplace for all of these tangible assets, but there is no marketplace for our intangible assets. Intangible assets are the wealth of the innovators, the inventors, and creators. Businessman Mark Getty said, "Intellectual property is the oil of the 21st century. All today's richest men have made their money out of intellectual property." Harvester, the IP marketplace, was founded by intellectual property attorney at law and educator Sarita Kalu to create a marketplace where intellectual property can be licensed, sold, and even funded on an online regional marketplace. This online platform also provides a database of intellectual property agents throughout the region, and its ancillary services include intellectual property filings, audits, and valuations, as well as freedom to operate services. The platform is a fully online platform that will utilize online payments. Harvester is meant to assist SMEs, creatives, and persons in the agricultural sector to manage and monetize their most valuable assets, their intellectual property assets, so that they can increase their revenue streams and expand quicker both locally and regionally.
Okay, so tell me, how can creatives use their works as collateral?
Right. So this is a long-term plan, of course. And we see it happening around the world where more and more intellectual property is being used as collateral. Because with the creative sector, the bulk of their value is in these intangible assets. So of course, if they need to use collateral or they need to get financing for whatever reason, that's all they have to put up. So first of all, I should mention that in our 2019 to 2023 trade policy, we actually have made provisions to get two financial institutions to start accepting intellectual property as collateral. So it's something that is in the works.
That is music to my ears.
You know, and it is something that is in the works. It's something that is very real, something that is in motion. And of course, we have these little aspects that we need to formalize to be able to let it happen. So first and foremost, to get to that end point, we need a marketplace. So the financial institutions need to know that if for whatever unfortunate reason they have to realize on their asset, there is a way for them to dispose of this asset, just as they would do for actual tangible assets. So that's the whole idea behind the marketplace. They also need to know that whatever value is being attached to this IP is a real value. And there are different ways in which you can value, and there are different types of valuations that are accepted depending on what you're using it for. And particularly for financial institutions, they're very interested in terms of the market value. And of course, you need a marketplace and you need a market to get that market value. And you also need, what they are most interested in is in terms of the future benefits of this IP. So that's using something called the income method, where you're basically looking to see what royalties or what amount of finances can this particular IP generate in the future. So what is the lifespan of it? And over that lifespan, what is the likelihood and what amount of royalties can it actually generate? So that if there are any issues, you know, they're still benefiting from what they're using as collateral.
Right.
And I mean, it's been done before, it's been done in different ways. And I think it's, in terms of us locally getting to that point, it would be to, of course, get the government involved, just as they plan to under their trade policy, and have them back those two financial institutions to be able to take that step to start accepting IP as collateral. We need certified IP valuators that can properly give them documents that they can rely on and valuations that are certified. And we need to have that marketplace that they could then, you know, if they have confidence that there's a way for them to realize any kind of benefit from the IP should they have to. So I think that's how we get to that point. where creators could then start using their intellectual property as collateral.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there are other creative ways in which our creatives can get financing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not just using it as collateral, but for example, I saw in 2017 the former managers of Eminem's records, so whoever
Mm-hmm.
he would have signed on to in the early stages, they had the rights, I think, 3 or 4 of his very popular songs. And what they did is that they formed that company and they issued shares, and the shares were directly related to the his works
Mm-hmm.
and the royalties generated from those works.
Mm-hmm.
And they auctioned off these shares, and it was a means of getting financing for the company. And those persons who owned the shares then earned every time royalties were paid towards those songs.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different creative ways that until we get to that point where our financial institutions are ready to accept IP as collateral, there are creative ways that our very creative creatives can find to, get financing where they need to get it.
So if you had to guesstimate like a timeline as to when you think this could possibly, in our lovely Trinidad and Tobago context, come to fruition, what would you say that timeline looks like?
I think if everyone plays their part, and by
Mm-hmm.
everyone I mean the private sector, the public sector, and the creative sector,
Mm-hmm.
I think I think realistically it could happen in the next 5 years. I know 5 years may sound long, but
Mm-hmm.
to do it we have to do it properly. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if as a region we come together and even on a national level, so you have the creative sector creating this marketplace. So they're doing synchronization licenses, they're offering their works
Mm-hmm.
for licensing, and they're creating this value, they're creating this market, this demand
Mm-hmm.
and sale of their, or licensing, I should say, of their rights. Then, of course, you have the government that has a very pivotal role where they can now assist financial institutions and back them so that it becomes less risky. And thirdly, I think we definitely need some input and some assistance from the private sector. So,
Mm-hmm.
private intellectual property attorneys, entertainment attorneys, IP agents from the
Mm-hmm.
private sector. I think they also play a very pivotal role in terms of IP education, in terms of guiding their clients properly to manage and monetize their IP.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once everybody plays their role, everybody plays their part, that we can get this done within 5 years. I don't see why
Mm-hmm.
not.
And I can see some artists and other creators jumping up and down for the collateral part of it. But as we the very first episode for this season was done by JMMB, and they focused a lot on the artists being sure to register their brand and their business and understand that they need to approach this as a business. So which very much ties into what you're talking about here, because in order for them to access that sort of facility, they need to be set up in such a structure. So I'm really hoping that it is being impressed upon them that they need to start moving towards that more business-like structure and
Definitely.
operating that way so that they can actually tap into some of these benefits that are available to them.
Yes, I
So
definitely think so, and I agree.
so yeah, so Tarita, it was wonderful talking with you. Thank you so
Likewise.
much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, you were a joy to talk to.
Likewise.
And thank you for indulging my wigglies on my head here. Um, so we just went through a lot of information here. And the closing comment of where can we learn more about IP Harvester?
Yes, so you can go onto the website, which is found at www.ipharvester.com.
Mhm.
And there's a host of resources. It has a lot of resources in terms of intellectual property, the different types of intellectual property, how exactly the platform works. There's also a blog where you can learn about different ways in which you could monetize and manage your intellectual property. And of course, you could always contact me. My contact information is there. And we also have socials on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right. So there you have it, folks. And the website to check out is www.ipharvester.com. All right. So we hope you enjoyed that very informative session. And up next, don't leave yet, we have our live Q&A. So be sure to participate, type your questions and your comments in the chat, and let's fire it up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope you're hearing me. And thank you for listening into this session. I hope that you found it very informative. First of all, I just want to thank MuiscTT for inviting me to be a part of this initiative of theirs in terms of their Reverb series. I think it's such an amazing series for the entertainment industry. And I mean, MuiscTT has been such a welcome addition to the entertainment industry and the building of the entertainment industry. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to share with you this evening, and I'm very thankful that you have tuned in. I will now be taking questions. I'll give you a chance to type your questions in. And, well, I'm now seeing actually some comments here. Let me see if there are any questions here. Yes, so there's the so before I start, just as a way of introduction, I know you heard a lot from me just now, but I'm an intellectual property and entertainment attorney at law, and I practice from my boutique legal practice at Tarita Kalu Law. And while my legal practice focuses on IP protection and enforcement of IP rights, IP Harvesters now focused on IP management. So let me get to the first question, and in between I can let you know a little bit more about the platform. So the first question is, how do people become certified IP evaluators? So that's an excellent question. There are currently, to my knowledge, no certified IP evaluators in Trinidad and Tobago, and possibly in the wider Caribbean. And firstly, it's a very specialized field, and it's very similar and operates very similarly to the real estate industry. So anytime you have to buy or sell property, you would go to a evaluator, and the financial institutions would recognize anyone that's certified by the Royal Chartered Institute of Surveyors. And so this particular entity, there's a very long process that you can go through to qualify as a certified valuator. And just as there is a certified valuation for real estate, there's also one for intellectual property. And it is based on the level of experience that you have, your background in terms of IP valuation, because it's a very specific type of valuation. And once you qualify, then you have that backing behind you to give certified valuation reports. But of course, there are different ways in which you can, depending on the purpose of the valuation, do valuations without that particular certification. But I just think it's a more verified way of determining if you're an IP evaluator or not, because it really is a very specialized field. But thank you very much for your question. I'm seeing another question here. Any advice for someone who wants to protect their intellectual property like song lyrics without having to assign your copyright to a third party? Okay, so intellectual property has various ways in which it's protected. So there are certain types of intellectual property, such as trademarks or patents, for example, where to protect it, you actually have to file at the Intellectual Property Office, and it's examined, and then once it passes all of their criteria, you are granted particular rights. Specifically, this question deals with song lyrics, and song lyrics fall within the realm of copyright. And the beauty of copyright protection is that the minute that you create it, copyright protection subsists in it, and therefore you have protection of the works. Of course, the problem that arises is asserting that particular proof of ownership. And so there are various ways that persons use. I'm sure everyone is familiar with what they term the poor man's copyright. So they mail a copy of the works to themselves. There are some jurisdictions in which this has not really stood up as a valid form of proving ownership. And so there are other means. So you can go before a commission of affidavits and swear a statutory declaration and attach a copy of your works. There are also there's also different registration offices in different jurisdictions around the world. The most popular one that persons use locally is the U.S. Copyright Office, where you can go and you can deposit your works and you will get a certificate. One issue that has been flagged pretty often in this field is the fact that it may not be very cost efficient to do so when you have a whole portfolio of works. So if you have a lot of works, and some works you may not necessarily know whether or not you want to protect it or want to monetize it, I should say. So you may not necessarily want to go the whole route in terms of filing it with the U.S. Copyright Office. So you can possibly utilize the statutory declaration, for example, in the interim. And there are new technologies that are coming out. So, for example, the use of blockchain technology to now file your works and show, a timestamp and date. And it is such an excellent verifiable way of proving your time used that's also an excellent resource that persons can look at. It has not been, this particular issue has not been tested properly in our local courts, so I can't give you a verifiable way of proving this, but these are just ways in which you can assert your protection. Just ensure that you keep track and copies of everything that you have done, and you will be able to assert your protection and assert your right in terms of the copyright rights. The next question says, as it relates to rights sharing, how would it work if I'm a songwriter and I need to hire a producer to produce my music? Oh, so this is an excellent question, and one that is very important to understand in the entertainment industry. So the basic rule of copyright protection and copyright rights is that any person that works on a particular either artistic, musical, or literal work has copyright ownership in it. So, for example, if I write the lyrics to a song, I write every single verse and chorus, and another person comes in and adds in 2 words just to change it, they also have copyright ownership in those works. And in terms of how the royalties will be distributed, it's 50-50 unless there's some previous written agreement. And so this is a very, very important aspect of copyright law that we need to be cognizant of in terms of collaborations and in terms of working with other persons. This question though deals with a producer. So there are different types of intellectual rights that subsist in these musical works. So you have copyright, and copyright protects, for example, the composition, both the musical and the lyrical composition. Where you hire a producer to produce that particular work and create a master copy for you, there are something called neighboring rights, or in some jurisdictions it's called related rights, and that arise. And this is a separate right that arises, and it protects the producer of the work. So in terms of that neighboring right, the producer will be the owner of that of the neighboring rights in that master. So every time, for example, that song with the master is reproduced in some form, the copyright owner, which would be the person who created the lyrics and the musical composition, would have royalties to collect from the copyright subsisting in the work, and then the producer would then have the neighboring rights subsisting in the work and would have certain royalties to collect on that end as well. The next question is, how much money do you need to be making in order to avail yourself of the IP marketplace? Lawyers' fees are not cheap in real estate either. So, so thank you for your question. I agree with you. Particularly in the field of IP, because it can get very complicated, and these types of agreements are so specialized. It can be costly. So, what we did in terms of IP Harvester, we created the platform in a way that it can be used by individuals themselves without the need to go to an IP attorney. So, for example, if you're at the stage where you want to offer your works to sale, and because you've been in the industry for a while, you have a good idea of what is a fair licensing fee for it, how much you are willing to license it for, and the ways in which you're willing to license it for. You can go onto the platform, you can create a profile, and for free of charge, you can list your work there without having to engage any sort of IP agent. Because on the platform, we're not just going to have IP attorneys, but IP agents in general. So persons that are specialized in the field from all facets of life. So they could be from the entertainment industry and have a wealth of knowledge there. They can be from the business industry, and so on. So it's not just going to be attorneys and attorney fees, but you can definitely go on there and use it yourself. I of course would advise caution in terms of when you're getting into any agreements and signing anything, just to make sure you understand what it is that you're signing or agreeing to. But we do have an IP blog that we will continuously be posting tips and information that will be useful for persons who are going to do it on their own, because the realities are that a lot of persons are not at this stage where they want to expend any sort of resources on legal fees, particularly given the hard hit that the entertainment industry would have had due to COVID. So the option is there. You have a wide variety of options where you can do it yourself, or you can go online and you can contact one of the agents, whether it be an IP attorney or an IP agent. The next question is there a time limit as to how long you can list your IP on the marketplace? No, there's no time limit. Well, actually, in general. So, of course, there are certain IP rights that expire. So, if you have a patent is only valid for 20 years once you continuously renew it. Industrial design rights are only valid for 15 years in 3 consecutive periods of 5 years. So in terms of those types of rights where the rights expire, of course, once it expires, you would not be able to list it on the site after that period of time. In terms of copyright subsists for the life of the author plus 50 years in our jurisdiction. It's longer in other jurisdictions. And so you can list it for as long as it's a valid right and it doesn't go into the public domain. And in terms of trademark rights can be renewed indefinitely. And so once you continuously renew it, you can list your trademark there for licensing. Does anyone have any further questions? Going back to the point of the person who was asking whether you need an IP attorney. So I just wanted to let you know, there's a wealth of resources on intellectual property and in the entertainment industry in particular online. I know that there may not be a lot of information specific to our region, but I'm also involved in a lot of IP education, and I try to put as much information out there. So I do have an IP blog, well, IP forum that's interactive. You could go on there, you could read, and you can ask questions. And I have a lot of videos and articles that you could read up on as well if you want to do it yourself and learn more on the field. So you could find that at www.taritakalu.com. Okay, so I have some more questions here. Can you do non-exclusive licensing on IP Harvester? Yes, so definitely. You can do any type of licensing. The beauty of licensing is that it's so flexible, and it can be designed in any way that both parties agree to. So you can offer non-exclusive licenses. So if you go onto the platform now, actually, you would see there are a couple beats by this company, Just for Gigs, on there. And it's offered for a synchronization license, meaning that any person that wants to use that beat for an ad or for anything that they may be needing a beat for, they can go on there and they can get a license. And it's a non-exclusive license, meaning that any other person could also access it. This is an excellent revenue stream for persons that have a lot of beats maybe lying on their floor, and it's maybe excellent beats, they just don't know what to do with it. Giving non-exclusive licenses at a very reasonable cost is beneficial to the person using it, because it's cost effective for them, and it's beneficial for the person owning it, because you can benefit from a lot of persons using your work, and you can structure it in terms of how many times it's used, or the length of period it's used, or what it's used for. So you can offer both non-exclusive and exclusive licenses on the platform. The next question is, do you think that in 5 years, if your prediction is correct, artists may no longer need a day job in order to acquire traditional financial prudence assets and security for retirement, etc.? That is definitely a possibility, I would say. I think that particularly in the entertainment industry, it's such a valuable industry in our region. And the more that I look at what's there in the marketplace, you're seeing these entertainers become business persons. And this I don't even think it needs to take 5 years, to be quite honest. Persons are now branding themselves, and they're branding their work, and they're branching out into different areas in the industry. So they may not necessarily solely rely on the entertainment industry, although it's very possible to do so, but they also could expand throughout the region. They could expand to different markets, they could expand to different products or services. And I'm seeing the trend happening where persons are protecting their works. They could protect their sound. We have a lot of famous singers that have distinctive sounds, and they could license that out for different things, for advertisements, for movies. And persons, because we are trying to increase the revenue streams available in the industry, I think definitely that we can within 5 years realistically get to the point where our entertainers could focus on entertainment, and they could focus on their industry, and they don't necessarily need a 8 to 4 job to hold them on, or to make them financially stable. I'm not seeing any further questions. If anyone else has anything else they wanted to ask, you could feel free to add it in there. In the interim, I will just tell you a little bit more about the Harvester platform. So I think it's a platform that a lot of persons in the entertainment industry could find beneficial. So I would invite everyone to check out the platform. I think it's very user friendly. I'm not the most tech savvy person around, and I have managed to make my way around it. And so I would welcome everyone to go onto the platform and try it out. We have all our contact information on there, on our social media platforms as well. And so if you have any questions, you could always reach out to us, and we can see how we can assist you. We'll give you advice in terms of the best way to use it. I think it has a lot of possibilities for persons to not just increase their revenue streams by licensing, but also, for example, if you have a very excellent project that you want to work on, but that you think could be a good financial opportunity for you, but you may not have the resources, one of the services that you can use the platform for is to post your project on there and let persons know that you're looking for funding. There are a lot of equity investment firms that would be interested in investing in these types of projects. We have even locally here, we have specialized entities like that, and we're actually speaking to those types of entities to see how we can bridge the gap between the services that they offer and the services that persons may need using the IP Harvester platform. So I really encourage you to go on it and check it out, read the articles that are on there, and also to follow our social media pages where we will be posting a lot of information specific to IP management and IP commercialization onto that platform. And as I said before, if you want specific advice or information in terms of intellectual property law, you can check out the Teresa Kalu Law social media pages or the IP forum to get that type of information. I am not seeing any further questions. So I will just give you a few minutes or so in case you have any last questions you may want to add. But of course, if you think of any questions subsequently, just reach out to us and we will be happy to speak with you and answer any concerns or questions that you may have. So I will just wait one more minute or two, and once there are no further questions, we can wrap up for the evening. And thank you again for tuning in. I really do hope that this has been the information has been beneficial, and also that you could find some sort of beneficial use for this platform in your business. I hope it is something that you can use to take your business to the next level, and I really hope it's something that can help the region as a whole to have an appreciation for intellectual property rights and to find creative ways in which to monetize it and to manage it. So thank you very much. Thank you again, MuiscTT. It has been an absolute pleasure working with you all on this. And thank you very much for your well wishes. So I hope to be hearing from you all. I hope to be seeing new postings on the Harvester site. And I wish everyone a good evening. So thank you.